I'm going to move to Stephen and talk about what's going on in the audit committee space. Though I think everybody's kind of teed you up a little bit, Mr. Dabney. So take it away.
Thank you, Dennis. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to touch on two things, both of which have real impact to the audit committee. The one is the climate rule, the second being cyber. I certainly am not going to go into great detail with respect to climate. I suspect most, if not everyone on this call has gotten a fair dose of board education relative to the proposed climate rule, but I did want to touch on a couple of things. So just to level set, the commission proposed the rule in April of 22. The commission received approximately 13,000 response letters, 4,000 of which were unique. Unique being thoughtful, diligent, something that required reading, processing, and if you, as we did at the firm, look at those responses, well, we didn't look at all of them. We looked at enough to really discern that the rule got quite a bit of support across really all number of stakeholders. Technology, if you look at industry, technology and professional services were two of the biggest supporters of the climate rule. The staff has come out here in January and said expect to see the climate rule in April. For many of you, you know that that's never firm. It could slip to the right, but I think most of us would conclude that the release of a final rule relative to climate is imminent. And if I would define imminent here in the next 60 to 90 days, I don't foresee it going further than that. That's obviously speculative, but I think there are so many stakeholders who are pushing for this. I think there would be an upheaval if the commission didn't release it in that time frame. A couple of other observations. There is no secret that there are issuers and there are trade groups sitting and waiting for this rule to be released to file litigation. It will be almost immediate. And while I want to be careful because I'm not a lawyer, you know, the question really is when those suits are filed, will there be a stay and everyone just stands still while it works its way through the system, or in the absence, everyone continues down the path of compliance with the rule in its form. So two other observations with respect to the rule. It's speculative, but when we look at it, there are probably two areas that are likely to be changed relative to the proposal. The first of which, and maybe the easiest of which, is the bright line 1% materiality threshold. That got a lot of negative feedback, and the staff clearly heard and I think is processing that. The alternative to the 1% would be the exercise of judgment that preparers and auditors use on a daily basis when preparing financial statements and auditing them. And that is, it's just a exercise of judgment as to what is financially material. So again, being speculative, I would not be surprised to see some relief in regards to that bright line test. Obviously, scope 3 is the second area. I think issuers believe, look, I can go capture, measure, and put controls around my scope 1 and my scope 2. But whatever I do around scope 3 is for the most part, an estimate for which it is really hard to put rigorous controls around. So I would not be surprised to see some form of relief relative to scope 3. Any number of options are available to the commission relative to relief around scope 3. They could ask, well, provide it, but it wouldn't be subject to attestation, don't provide it at all, or delay over a period of time that which would be required to be disclosed and audited, i.e. maybe you say scope 3, you got 2 or 3 years to get ready before that becomes filed and audited. So the rule is imminent, likely to see, most certainly we'll see some changes. And if we were to guess, those would be the 2 areas that would be most meaningful.
Stephen,
Yes.
before you move on, one of the things that you didn't mention, that maybe it's not as important as the bright line 1% or the scope 3 stuff, but as I understand the current proposal and the attestation element suggests that whoever's providing whatever attestation has to be a firm subject to PCAOB inspections. If that were to survive, that's kind of a game changer for the current service providers, that lots of companies who think they're doing the right thing by getting a third party may have to find a different third party, or it's going to be acquisition central at the big 4 and the next tier worth of firms. Could you speak to that one?
Yeah, Dennis, yeah, that is what the proposal calls for. As many know, that in past years, there were those in the S&P 500 that would get some type of certification on metrics included in their CSR, but they were doing so with the help of engineering firms and others. And you're exactly right. If it gets mandated into an external auditing firm registered with the PCAOB, there is going to be a ramp up in resources. Certainly, the big 4 firms are anticipating that with or without the mandate, because there's already been an uptick. And the profile, Dennis, of the people that we're hiring looked a little different than guys like you and I, right? Because you need folks who know how to audit greenhouse gases and things of that nature. And that's not things that we've been per se trained on. So to answer your question, yeah, it is going to require a ramp up. Let me just speak to one other climate related element, and that's the following. Regardless of where the commission goes with the final rule, the stakeholders demanding ESG data is not going to stop. And corporate America is responding to it already. And that momentum, again, in my opinion, will not stop. The interesting thing is the staff, under the current rules, has really ramped up the number of comment letters prepared and sent to issuers. And in fact, they sent in this past review cycle 70 comment letters specific to climate. And that 70 letters accounted for 480 comments. The most prominent, not surprising, the most prominent comment was the staff inquiring about consistency between the filed Form 10K and your CSR, and identification of what they viewed as inconsistencies between what was said or disclosed in one document or the other. Clearly, in this case, the issuers had a defense, and the defense was there are very prescriptive rules for the 10K. We complied with those. And then we have a CSR report that we prepare for the benefit of a much broader stakeholder group. And we may provide additional information in the CSR that doesn't go into the 10K. The staff was, for the most part, willing to accept that argument and really didn't push back. The staff made a number of inquiries regarding carbon credits and offsets. If the issuer came back, quantified in the response those credits and offsets, the staff generally accepted that and moved on. The staff asked in 95% of the letters about physical climate risk. So point is this isn't going away. Whatever happens with the rule itself, may slow certain elements of it, attestation, scope 3, but the momentum will not relent, and the staff will continue to press by way of comment letters using the rules out there right now that they expect compliance with. And the last thing I'll tell you is the PCOB is not far behind them. The PCOB this past cycle did what they called targeted reviews. Those reviews were specific to climate. The PCOB staff was very clear that it was educational in nature. I would say the PCOB staff took a relatively soft touch when they executed the targeted inspections. I don't think any comments came from them, but they too are getting focused. They're acknowledging they're trying to get smarter. And the most prominent question is, if you take something like oil field services, the question is, well, if people are moving to green energy, does that have some implication for your traditional tangible assets that you're using in the day-to-day execution of your business? That is was proved to be a relatively easy comment to respond to, because the energy space is in an up cycle, and number two, it's going to take a long time to transition to green. I only offer that example to you because it is where the staff is going and the PCOB is going with respect to auditors.
Hey, Stephen, the participants are firing up the chat room.
Yeah.
I know I want to get to that, but I know you had cyber. Can you give me a 2-minute version of cyber?
Yeah,
there's also some cyber questions come in, so we'll spend more time on it.
Yeah, maybe even more quickly. When I think about cyber, I think about being that director who is going to be named as the subject matter expert. And that's a heavy weight to carry, likely as one person on the board. Because as Janice pointed out, the boards are getting to the point where you've got somebody who's the financial statement expert, somebody who is cyber, somebody who's a strategy, and you find yourself kind of being that person who's responsible for really exercising oversight. What's my point? It's a lot of risk. It's a lot of responsibility for one person. And if those people are in high demand from a recruitment perspective, but lots and lots of risk going forward. The second observation is, if you have an incident, you have 4 days to disclose. And for any of you that have been through a meaningful cyber incident, after 4 days, you sometimes don't know how many systems have they penetrated, how long have they been there, how much data have they gathered, Are they still there? 4 days in the context of a material cyber investigation is nothing. And the risk, right, that you can foresee is in the boardroom. There will be a desire to comply with the rule, but general counsel, for good reason, will be incredibly nervous because he or she will know whatever is disclosed in that Form 10K will not be the complete story. And you subject yourself to litigation because somebody says, well, what you put into the Form 8K was not complete. So that's going to be tricky. And then the other thing that I think most people are going to rely on here is an assertion that said cyber incident wasn't material. Well, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that exercise of judgment. But the question is whether or not the board, the CISO, and others have developed a methodology, no different than, frankly, an estimate included in your consolidated financial statements, whereby you quantify that risk in order to conclude, is it material or otherwise? And you don't want to be doing that on the fly. You want to be having that conversation before it happens so that you can have a thorough and timely conversation about, well, which bucket does it fall in? And if it falls into material, then you've got a whole nother issue that we've already talked about. But important to develop that methodology, again, so you're not developing it under pressure.
Great, thank you.